Hey, everybody. I have got a wonderful interview for you today. If you don't know Amanda Guarniere of the Resume RX, you are in for a treat because this is where you learn how to write a resume. I have been wanting to do this interview for the longest time, and God love her. Amanda and I actually did this interview 4 months ago, and I mucked it up, and we have been struggling ever since to get it re-recorded. So this has been a labor of love, and it is going to be well worth your time to watch. So please welcome her to my channel. If we haven't met yet, my name is Bree. I'm a nurse practitioner and RN mentor and an interview strategist and author. So welcome to the channel.
Hey, Bree.
Hey. Amanda is sort of a jack of all trades. She does a lot of things, but I'm gonna let her first tell us a little bit about her nursing journey and how she ended up where she's at now.
Sure. So I am an adult and women's health nurse practitioner, and I have been since 2011. And my nursing journey is a little bit of a twisty path. I'm a second degree nurse. So I actually went to undergrad for Italian language and violin, which is definitely as far from nursing and medicine as you could possibly get, maybe. And I basically had, one of those epiphany moments later in my journey, in my undergrad journey, when I realized, okay, I don't think these things are actually what I want to do with my life. And so I made a huge pivot after graduating and ultimately found myself applying to accelerated programs that would give me not only my RN certification, but also kind of drop me right into an NP program because I had realized that I ultimately wanted to be a provider. I really identified with that role. So I went to Yale School of Nursing from 2008 to 2011 and went straight through. I did my RN there. I worked as an RN while doing my nurse practitioner program. I did a dual certification program in adult and women's health. And after graduating, I kind of moseyed through a few different job areas before finding what ultimately ended up being my place in this clinical world, which for the past 6-7 years or so has been emergency medicine. So that's the majority of my clinical background. And I've been on a clinical sabbatical actually since 2020 for a myriad of reasons, a kind of a European maternity leave and some, pandemic issues.
I'll say you picked the exact right time.
Exactly. I know, right? So it was in 2020 that I decided to take this side business of mine, the Resume RX, and really make it my primary focus. So I had been helping nurses and nurse practitioners with different elements of the job search on the side for a couple of years. And when my clinical sabbatical began, that's when I really focused on being a content creator and mentor nearly full time. So that's what I've been doing since then. So that brings us to today.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys all already know her. She's pretty famous in her neck of the woods. She is the expert to go to for a nurse or nurse practitioner resume service. So tell me a little bit about, because I do want to get into some talking about how to write resumes. What do you think people struggle with the most when it comes to writing them?
I think there are plenty of things that nurses in particular struggle with. But one thing that I see a lot is that it's really hard for us to brag about ourselves.
Yes.
And if you haven't done that before, it can be really uncomfortable and really a strange feeling to know that you're writing these documents that you're really meant to not really be boastful, but you're meant to really lead with, the best of you and to talk about your best and brightest achievements. And that can be really uncomfortable. So that's kind of one thing I definitely see folks struggling with. And the other thing is that it can be, the skill of writing a resume is very disconnected from our actual skill sets as nursing professionals, right? Like we're not used to writing much more than, care plans. And if we even still do those after school, care plans, SOAP notes, and progress notes. And, the part of actually sitting down and writing a resume when you maybe have only done it once for a school assignment, if at all, is just very far from what we're used to doing. So it's really a muscle that we have not often worked out.
Yeah, it does get overwhelming. And then I struggle with it as well, because I get into this headspace of, well, what do they want to know? Because for someone that's been a serial job hopper and that's had a million jobs, like, you don't want to make it 5 pages long. So what do they want to know? What's important to put in there? And it gets like, you can get all in your head about it, and it can be very overwhelming. So I think your service is great for that. How many pages is the ideal resume?
So I think it depends on who you are as a professional and kind of where you are in your career. But for the majority of folks who are writing a clinical resume, meaning you're a clinical nurse or provider and you're going for another clinical role, I would say no more than 2 pages typically.
Yeah.
Some newer graduates or people who have maybe had just 1 or 2 jobs might be able to fit things onto 1 page. But for the majority of us with several years of experience, or if you're an NP with several years of RN experience, chances are you're looking at a 2-page resume. So that's really what I recommend striving for.
Yeah. That's what I tend to see come across my desk as well. So tell me the difference between a CV and a resume.
So a CV, which stands for Curriculum Vitae, means in Latin, life's work. And these terms get interchanged a lot, kind of erroneously, but a traditional CV is usually used in the academic or research setting, and it's multiple pages and features pretty much everything that you have ever done. So the people who are usually needing and using CVs have more than clinical experience. They have research papers, maybe they have publications, presentations, speaking engagements, faculty appointments, these types of things. These are all things that end up on a CV. And there's no need for brevity when it comes to a CV. The longest CV I rewrote was one that was 17 pages. So that is definitely of no concern when it comes to a CV. But usually people who are using CVs are applying to faculty roles or applying for research positions or research funding or doing some sort of publishing. Whereas a resume is really more of a clinically focused document, max 2 pages ideally, and you're usually only going back 10 years in the past on your resume.
So if there's a new graduate out there, whether they are a nurse or an NP, should they include work experience pre-healthcare?
So this is another, it depends. That's always my answer. So sorry.
Yeah. That's okay.
But if your pre-healthcare experience, if there are some transferable skills into your healthcare experience, then absolutely. And what are transferable skills? Those are things that may not be exactly healthcare skills, but they're still skills that you're going to take with you into the healthcare world. So just for example, things like customer service, that's something that we're really in the business of as healthcare providers, whether we realize it or not. So if you have a previous position where you did a lot of customer service, then that potentially is relevant. I would say though, once you have been working in healthcare for a bit of time, once you have a couple years of healthcare related experience, you can let those other things fall off unless they're really, really relevant or really impressive or somehow going to be involved in your work moving forward. For example, I was talking with someone who's about to graduate from NP school who has a background as an attorney and has an interest in kind of merging those 2 worlds as they move forward in their new NP career. So certainly I'm going to recommend that they keep that on there, but not focus on the nitty-gritty legal stuff. They're going to focus on kind of what they're taking from their legal background into their healthcare role.
That makes sense. I can appreciate that. One of the other questions I had, kind of along the same lines of the CV versus the resume discussion, I've seen a couple of resumes come across my desk that have, I feel like, way too much fluff, way too much detail in them. And much of it tends to be very repetitive, and it falls usually under the job descriptions, previous jobs that they've had. It's almost like they copied and pasted the job posting description. It's very generic stuff that doesn't really tell me anything specific about that job. So then I have to reflect on, well, what would be the ideal thing? Just to say I had this many hours in this role and just assume that the reader understands what is entailed in that kind of a role? Or do you include some description about what your main job, priorities were?
Yeah, I think this is a great point, and I see this a lot too. And I agree with you that really those bullet points under your previous jobs shouldn't really be focusing on the job description. It should really be focused on any accomplishments or achievements in the role. So I usually like to put maybe one bullet point of context.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, the majority of roles, if it's a healthcare person reading the resume, they're probably going to be able to deduce what the role kind of looks like based on what you've put just in the title. So if you said you worked as a
Right.
registered nurse on a medical ICU, um, and that's the title, and then you put where you worked
Mm-hmm.
and the dates, a healthcare person is going to be able to make some good assumptions about what your daily life looked like, about what your core competencies are, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe in that first bullet point, you would provide some context and, really describe the medical ICU, describe the institution that you're working at,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is this, a level 1 trauma facility with 900
Mm-hmm.
beds that has, a medical ICU and a surgical ICU and a step down and a progressive, like giving that type of context so that they can really understand what your role was. That really shouldn't take a bullet point or maybe two. And then the rest of the space, I think, should really speak to your specific skills above and beyond the basic duties of whatever that role is, right? So please don't regurgitate the nursing process.
Right.
Don't say that assessed per,
Diagnose and treat.
yeah, diagnosed and treat, administered medication per orders.
Mm-hmm.
This is stuff that it goes without saying, right? And it's a waste of
Right. That's true.
space. It's a
That's
waste of
true.
space. And for the person reading it, they're going to see all this fluff. They're not going to know what to pay attention to. So be, be judicial, take that stuff out and instead focus on, what committees did you participate in? What were some
Mm-hmm.
main diagnoses that you cared for? What extra trainings did you do, or special skill sets do you have that are unique to this role or that are highly desirable in the next role? Because that's really the perspective we want to have on our resumes. We want to write for the role that we want,
Right.
not necessarily the roles that we've had. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of finding that middle ground of, okay, what is the person in this next job looking for in an ideal candidate, and making sure that is shining through as best as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I usually will only say, because I work for critical care medicine, which can be a lot of different specialties, a lot of different
Sure.
settings based on, different hospitals. So I'll usually say mixed ICU setting, particularly CCU, CVICU, neuro ICU, and just so that it gives them a better view of what I have spent a lot of time doing. But I don't need to
Sure.
go into the detail about what you do in a CCU and the type of clients you see there. I mean, it's pretty standard stuff.
Right.
So
Right.
that's just kind of how I approach it. Okay, so this is something I knew nothing about that you had to teach me. Can you tell us what the ATS is?
Yes. So ATS stands for Applicant Tracking System. And what it is essentially is different types of softwares that employers use to pre-screen resumes before they get read by a human.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've ever applied to a job online and you've used some sort of form filler and you've had to upload your resume and fill in some boxes and hit submit, chances are that is going through some sort of ATS software.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially on the employer side, they create a profile of the ideal candidate based on the job requirements and qualifications. And those essentially get kind of plugged into the software as keywords. And what the software does is it reads the submissions, looks for those keywords that match up to what they've entered on the employer side, and it ranks each resume and decides how qualified you are based
Mm-hmm.
on this kind of algorithm robot analysis, right?
Crazy.
And then it essentially ranks them, and there, maybe like a cutoff score, and anything below a certain score just automatically gets a rejection email. And then anything above gets, funneled up to a real human. And, the intent of the software is good. It's not malicious, but it's meant to screen a lot of candidates in a shorter period of time, because it would take a really long time for HR professionals to screen every single resume that came in, right? So the intent is a positive intent, but what ends up happening is if your resume is not optimized for the ATS, or you're not really sure how to make sure that your qualifications are kind of passing through appropriately, then you potentially could get erroneously rejected, even though you're a great candidate. And so that causes a lot of anxiety and nerves among folks, because they're like, okay, I know that I'm qualified for this job, but I hit submit and within 5 minutes, I got a rejection. What's that all about? So there are some kind of best practices that we talk about when it comes to the ATS to try to boost your odds of, of getting that pathway through to a human.
Yeah. It's scary stuff right there. It's like when you take boards and you hit 75 and it cuts off. You're like, wait, what does that mean? Please don't do this to me. What does that mean?
Exactly.
Okay, the next question is going to be, it's going to sound a little bit off topic, but just bear with me because I'm going to come back to it. It's going to be a solid point. What are your thoughts on market saturation?
So this is like, I love this hot topic, right? Like most people have a very, passionate feeling one way or the other. So market saturation is kind of this idea that there are more candidates than there are jobs. And there's kind of this chatter that's been going around for several years that the NP workforce is growing at a faster rate than the actual demand, than the jobs available. And there are some conflicting statistics with this idea. The Bureau of Labor Statistics does not support that there is, nationwide oversaturation, despite the fact that, yes, our profession is growing at a fast rate. And just, I think we've doubled in just the past 10 years since I've graduated in terms of number of NPs. So I really think that what's happening more so is an experience gap, where because there are more newer NPs, there are fewer NPs with experience, because, the majority of them, if you were to kind of like look at a curve or look at a graph, we really swing on the less experienced side. There are more less experienced NPs, and employers may be there is more demand for more experienced NPs because, patients are sicker, the demand on healthcare system, employers may be preferring more experienced NPs. So what that creates is this experience gap. And, there are certainly parts of the country that have much more of a problem in terms of supply and demand in the job market. But it seems to be kind of an isolated few metro areas, and the country as a whole, there are plenty of places where you can go and easily find a job if you're willing to work in rural health, for example. Like, I don't know that that rural health will ever be oversaturated when it comes to positions. So, it's kind of like, I don't know, enticing and cool to be polarizing and say, the NP job market is oversaturated and we should just stop allowing and admitting NPs into programs because it's causing a detriment to our profession. Like, this is what other people might say. And I find that messaging is very, very harmful to new NPs, especially ones who are just getting ready to graduate and look for jobs, because what it does is it creates this terrible negative mindset loop that really keeps people in this kind of fear-based decision-making place, that kind of gets you in this desperation thing. Oh, if I'm hearing that there are really no jobs, then I might take the first job that I'm offered. And the first job that I'm offered might be a really crappy job because of how I'm applying and desperation. Exactly. So I really, really try to overturn that mindset of oversaturation and really focus on, what's factual, what's in your control as an applicant, and try to kind of steer clear of that negativity, because I don't think that it does anyone any favors.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on it. And, on the Facebook forums, there are some very adamant people who are like, oh, it's saturated, stay away. And I'm like, this is, if you're doing this for the right reasons, you will find your place. It's the people who are doing it for the wrong reasons, the expedience, they think they're going to make more money or they're burned out. They're going to give up because it's not going to be super easy to acquire a job.
Yeah.
And then they're going to just be burnt. I mean, the whole situation is going to be tainted for them because of that. So I think it all comes back to, what are your motivations and what are you willing to do for this? And but I absolutely think there is a need for more NPs and that people should do it if they want to. So I love that you spread that message because I feel like there are fewer and fewer of us who support that these days.
Well, it's kind of cooler to complain, right?
Right.
It's easier to complain.
Right. So. Right. So how much do you think resumes play into job acquisition?
So I think resumes are important. They're certainly not the only thing. I like to think of job acquisition as a three-legged stool. And if one of those legs is shorter than the other or is broken, then that stool is going to topple over. So
Sure.
resume is definitely one of those legs.
Mm-hmm.
Another one of those legs, I think, is the interview. And the third leg is the job search strategy. So basically the methods by which you are looking for and applying to jobs. And I think when all three of those you're spending time on all three of those things and optimizing those three things as best as possible, then I think you're in a prime position to end up in a job that's going to be fulfilling and supportive and satisfying for you.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And one of those legs of the stool you were talking about, how many jobs do you feel like are filled by online postings?
Less than half.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. So there aren't studies or stats specific to our industry, but there have been plenty of studies across multiple industries over the past several years that cite fewer than 50% of jobs are filled by online postings, which is, really astounding when you think of it, especially if you're someone who is really comfortable doing things on the computer. And, we grew up with computers. We're kind of, a digital generation, right? And to hear that, oh, you might actually have to talk to people in person and reach out and kind of sell yourself to someone who doesn't know who you are is really frightening, and it's uncomfortable, and it's not the easy way, but it is the more proven way, the more successful way to end up in a job that's going to be a good fit.
Yeah. And I actually feel like, I don't know numbers either, but just from my experience on what I see on my end is we definitely hire within. It's almost rare that we put anything out there online because we generally already have a candidate in mind, and it's typically someone with experience already. So this also supports that earlier argument of the experience gap that you talk about, which is it's very, I'm sure, discouraging for new people and the don't apply if you have no experience kind of situation, which is tough. But yeah, I agree. So you can't just look on the leaderboards and see what's available. You got to go out there. You got to cold call people. You got to network. You got to find out what's hidden or what could potentially be. One of the job offers I received was during my clinical phase, and there was not an open position, but they had a lady who was looking at retiring within the next year or two. And they liked me. So they were like, we can make an argument to create another FTE. And we think you could generate this many RVUs. So we'll make an argument for this and bring you on so you can kind of bridge her, passage out. So it's almost selling yourself to people about how you can, increase their revenue and how you can contribute to them. And there may not even be something available. So you got to be a salesman, which is not natural to most of us nurses.
Right. No, it's not natural, but you're right. And I hear so many stories like that. And your clinical rotations are a great place to start with these connections, right?
Yeah.
If you had a clinical rotation that you enjoyed, that you did well, you don't need to be asking them, do you have any job openings? Don't go to their website to see if they have any job openings. You've already met the office manager. Stop by during lunch and casually say, I'd really love to work here after graduation. Tell me what it's like. Tell me what your provider forecast is, and just open up the conversation. And you can do that at the beginning of your clinicals. If you're not going to graduate for a couple of years, it gives them even more time to, plan and get approval for a spot for you, but I think, coming from the RN world, we're so used to much more, standard and traditional ways of applying that
Yep.
it can feel really foreign to kind of be empowered to say, okay, what type of job do I want? All right, let me go let them know.
Right.
Let me just
It's
go
true.
throw my hat in the ring for this thing that may or may not be an option.
Yeah.
But it's like, what do you have to lose, right?
Yep. Yep. It's very true. It's very true. Well, let me talk a little bit about the programs that you offer and services that you offer, because I think you can help new and experienced NPs and nurses in multitude of ways. And gosh, I really wish that I knew about you, or I don't even know if, you probably weren't around when I started as a new NP, but how I would have loved using your resources when I was writing my resume initially, and even beyond that, like job acquisition, because you do so much more than just resume writing. Teaching. So you have like your biggest platform that I see is your weekend resume makeover, right? Yeah, that's the one that walks you through like start to finish how to write a resume. If you're not experienced with it, you follow along with you and you literally tell us what to do step by step, which is
Exactly.
that's the option I would go for.
Totally. And that program, we've recently renamed it,
Okay.
like last week. It's called Resume Makeover Pro now.
Okay.
The weekend was kind of confusing people, but essentially it's laid out in 3 steps, and it's all self-paced, go at your own pace, pre-recorded. You don't have to show up live for anything. And yes, I have videos and audios and lessons walking you through how to write every single step of the resume and cover letter, some special circumstances, and I include all my resume templates, so you don't have to worry about formatting. That's all done for you, as well as word for word scripts and a bullet bank, that you can use for inspiration. It's really the easy button when it comes to getting your resume done. And, I used to do this as a service for others, custom. You come to me, tell me all your information, and I'd write your resume for you. And what I learned over time, I simultaneously developed this program. And what I found was students going through this program were producing resumes as good as, if not better than what I could do for them, because no one knows you like you do, right?
True.
And it's also such a powerful skill to have, to be able to write your own resume, to update your own resume, and not be reliant on finding someone to do it for you, because who knows when that promotion's going to, show up and you're going to need to throw your resume in for it. Or, if you hear that someone's retiring and you want to throw your hat in the ring, being able to have control over that process yourself, I think is a really important skill to have.
And I think what's super unique about you is that, there are a million people out there who sell resume templates. You can even find stuff online that's free, but the difference for you is that it's specific to the healthcare arena, particularly nurses and NPs. And those bullet banks that she just breezed over and just said it in a word are worth their weight in gold, y'all. These are like tried and true vocabulary that will just blow your mind. You're like, oh my gosh, that's a perfect way to describe what I'm good at, in specific to your role in nursing. So it's that to me, and it's even specialized to the specialty that you work in, right? Like you have GI and you have renal and so the unique talents that are desired for someone in that role, you've provided to us. It's like having the secret weapon, y'all. It is, to me, worth its weight in gold. So I think what you have is very special, and I think that people need to know about it.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. So I will include all of her links below. I'll let her give us her shout outs, and I will include her links. Her website is on there as well. She's the Resume RX, and you can use my link and get a 20% off, or use the code SAVE20 at checkout. So tell us where we can get in touch with you, Amanda.
Yeah, so I hang out mostly on Instagram. I'm at the Resume RX there, and I'm at the Resume RX on pretty much every social platform. I'm just starting to get into TikTok. You've kind of inspired me. And so I'm NP_Amanda over there.
Okay.
But I'm an elder millennial. I'm still figuring things out.
Girl, I am a geriatric millennial. I'm not a millennial. I'm a Gen Xer. So I'm the oldest person on TikTok. And my kids cringed when I did one dancing video just to highlight what a terrible dancer I am, which I thought was hysterical. It was not that funny, apparently, to young people. So if you want to just get on there and talk, they're fine with that too, but yeah, TikTok is its own beast.
Yes, for sure. I'm
So,
very inspired and encouraged by you. So
yeah. Well,
thank you.
you get a lot of people that check you out on that platform. So
Yeah.
all right. Well, thanks so much for coming on here today, Amanda. And guys, go check her out. Okay.